So what happens at this stage of the interview? You're the interview candidate.
Normally we sit down, have a chat about what they're interested in, how the interviews have been going, what they had problems with. A lot of just icebreakers, what they're interested in. Try to see if to get a gauge of how interested they are in technology.
Right. Now, are you talking to prior interviews that the candidates had? I mean, you guys are talking on email and stuff like that with the other interviewers.
Yeah, the other people
Yes.
from the day.
Yes.
Yeah. Typically, you have a good sense of what's been asked, and you get some guidance on. Oh, I didn't have time to I didn't have time to probe a certain thing. This is something I'd be really interested in probing, or I wasn't able to talk about something, but I really wanted to ask him about this interest that he has, or something like that.
Right. So, what other kinds of questions do you try to ask to get into somebody's technical knowledge?
Well, a lot of cases we've been hiring college hires, so recent projects they've done, favorite projects, projects they have difficulties with, group projects, how they worked, whether or not they were successful.
Typically, on an interview, you'll have a pretty diverse set of people in terms of where they went to college. So among the group of folks interviewing, it's pretty typical that someone will understand the curriculum that person went through pretty well. So we'll have a pretty good idea of if they felt this class was hard and they were really challenged by it. We'll have a mindset to understand that is one of the more challenging classes, and that is one that should be challenging to them. Also, we can usually discern pretty well whether or not, if they're talking about a project they worked on, whether or not that was for class or they did it on their own. And that's a telling factor is what people have done on their own outside of class. So
Interesting. So what about the famous whiteboard question? What goes on with that?
They're primarily programming questions to get an idea of coding style, experience with certain aspects of C and C++.
And that's what you're hiring for because you're on the Windows CE team. So
Yes.
other teams might be looking for C# or Java or
Java, yeah. There are instances where we interview for like SQL databasing stuff like that too.
And what's the purpose of the whiteboard challenge? Is it to try to trip up the candidate and find out what he doesn't know? What do you look for? First of all, what is a white? Give me an example of a whiteboarding question that you might ask.
Well, like the one I'm going to do today is detect a palindrome. So it's mainly, it's a fairly simple algorithm. Just try to figure out whether or not a string repeats itself from the edges going in. Just to see if they understand strings, they understand pointers, they understand how to use programming constructs in C.
I think the big thing is, can they come up with an algorithm? That's kind of step one, and then can they turn that into workable code, relatively bug-free? So that's essentially what we're looking for.
Okay. You don't want them to write a unit test or anything like that.
It depends. That could be one of the follow-up questions is to write some test cases, things like that. Both dev and SDET positions, you'll definitely be asked to do, how would you test it, how would you find your own bugs, things like that.
Right. Okay. So, why don't you show us why don't you ask a question? Actually, can you close the doors so I don't get
It is normally closed. So, Evan, I'd like you to code a function that detects a palindrome.
Okay.
So, just have a prototype. Are you familiar with t-chars?
Mm-hmm.
So it takes a t-char pointer. So do you have any questions about?
I just want to make sure my assumptions about tchar is right. Tchar is a 16-bit character. Are we assuming 16-bit character, or is it just based on however you compiled it with the system? Is it like
Based on however you compiled it.
so if I did like TSC string plus plus, that'll increment the right number based on how that'll increment 1 if it's 8-bit, 2 if it's 16-bit.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm not familiar with all of the tcarified string functions, but I'll make up the ones. So the first step is I'm going to assume that it could be either characters or string or numbers. So that a palindrome could be like 15251, or it could be A, B, B, A, like that, or it could be a mix. So I think the approach I'm going to take is to so I'll first find the end of the string, get a pointer to the end of the string, and I have my pointer at the beginning of the string that's passed in, and I'll just start marching down, compare, see if these two are the same, see if these two are the same. If they're compare the beginning and end, see if they're the same. If they're not equal, then does this return true and false?
Well, yes.
So if not equal, return false. If they are equal, then I'll just continue on and I'll increment the beginning, decrement the end, so they're pointing to the next characters, and repeat. And I guess I have a problem here if I need to know when to end, and I guess I have to take into account both even and odd size strings. So either, in this case, I end when they're right next to each other. In this case, I'm going to end when they're right on top of each other. But in this case, I still need to compare, and in this case, I don't. So if I pass in a string with that just has one letter, like M, is that considered a palindrome?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so I don't have to do much special casing. I end if so if beginning plus 1 is the same as n, that means right next to each other, then I can quit after I compare. If beginning and end are the same, I'll still quit. I'll compare it, but it'll obviously be the same. So that's the algorithm I'm going to take.
Great point. So how is he doing so far up to this point?
He's doing very well. He's highlighted his algorithm, asked a lot of clarifying questions about what special cases like single character, and mainly just laid out an entire algorithm before doing any coding.
Okay. What kinds of things do you look at this point?
Is he asking the right clarifying questions? Are there any situations he's missed? Any interesting conditions that he's missed?
So in this case, would you, I know there's something that I've missed, would you interject here and tell me to think about some other things, or would you let me write up, or just go right into the coding and then we'll work work on things from there?
I generally let go into coding, work on things from there, and then after asking them about maybe testing it, if they miss some other cases, suggest cases and see how their code handles it.
Cool.
Alrighty.
What should the candidate do if he forgot some of these when he gets to the end of the interview and he realizes, oh shit, I just went down a path that
If they're going the complete wrong path, then I'd probably interject. But generally, it'll just be corner cases that they missed. Small things that they overlooked, but can be still handled in their algorithm.
Now, when I was doing my interviews, when I got caught like that, I started focusing on that thing rather than the overall task. So, what are some tips for the candidate? You know, go on or relax or take a breath or
Relax, take a breath, and look over the algorithm and look over the code and see if they can see simple ways to fix the problem.
I think the thing I see most people doing is not testing it every step. Like right now, I should be thinking of all the ways I could break this, where this wouldn't work before I even start writing the code. So it's typically, you know, we say think first, then code. In an interview, I'd say think first, then think again, then take a baby step, then think again, then start coding, so that you've figured out all the problems before you really jump into the coding side.
run.
So if I hit an error condition like a null, let's say this gets passed in as null, should I just like return false?
Yeah.
Okay. So first thing we'll do is I'll check the input. Okay, so what did I say? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the end of the string, so I'll allocate all my variables over here. So I think it's actually beginning or end. String and end is beginning plus, I think it's something like I think that's the T-char version.
It's a TCS.
TCS? TCS what? Okay. Remember which ones are CS and which ones are just make sure. And is that going to give me the right ticketing thing? I think I need to I need to subtract 1 here, because if I do, if this is 4, I'm pointing here, 1, 2, 3, 4 will be pointing to the null. So I think this gets us pointing to the end, beginning and end of the string now. And I'll just do
What's the most unusual whiteboard question you've heard of?
I've heard of someone asking the person to code up an entire heap allocator, but they weren't allowed to use any data structures. That's just a single pointer. That's probably the most unusual.
Make a while loop here. So we'll continue through this while beginning and end are equal, or the thing that they're pointing to are equal. And we want to stop.
So you like his style where he's explaining what he's thinking of doing?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Stop if
It's best to be very vocal about thoughts and the process you're going through creating the code.
probably butchering this. So what I think I'm doing here is I have a while loop that's going to continue through until either beginning and end are pointing to something that's things that aren't equal, pointing to characters that aren't equal, or beginning is equal to or greater than end minus 1, which will be true if they're either next to each other or equal.
So earlier you asked me a clarifying question about whether or not tchar plus 1 goes to the next character or just up a byte. Now, it's the modification by size of tchar. Are you sure about that?
Oh, right. And you said it was, so it's going to go up 2 if it's compiled in 16-bit mode. It'll work fine in 8-bit mode, but in 16-bit mode it won't work right. Because you said that the pointer arithmetic will take into account everything it needs to.
Mm-hmm.
So both of these should just be minus 1. Okay. So either I get out of this loop one of 2 ways. Either beginning and end are no longer equal. Like I've got, they're pointing to 2 different things. Or it actually is a palindrome and I hit one of my stopping conditions. Except that if I've hit one of my stopping conditions, when do I need to check? Let's see. I guess what I could do is I could just check if beginning and end are the same and kill 2 birds with 1 stone, because if they are the same, then I'm in good shape. And that means I air it out because of this, and I'm doing my check. I still have to check to see if they're the same to know whether or not this was the reason I bailed out of this while. So
We have about 3 minutes to talk about that.
all right.
No time pressure.
I think I'm done.
So at this point, I'd have him walk me through a sample string, exactly what was going on in the function, and then come up with a list of test cases for the various interesting strings that could break it. So there's actually an interesting case that he's already missed it right now. What happens if there's a space? So how are spaces handled in palindromes?
So right now in my algorithm, it wouldn't take that into account. The spaces would have to be equal.
Right.
But I guess there's some palindromes that it's considered a palindrome. So that's where, at the beginning, I should have asked some more detailed questions about exactly what he meant by palindrome, because our definitions, in my mind, a palindrome is something different than what he had in mind. So I need to really make sure I understand what the interviewer is asking for.
But for the most part, that would just be a modification to the while loop. So it can be added simply, and it gets an idea of how they would modify the code and the thought process they'd go through to fix a bug in the code.
Very cool. Well, thanks for letting us sit in on a
problem.
whiteboarding interview question and see what sort of
Don't get to do that very often anymore.
Yeah. It has a little added stress when
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
and you have to do 5 of them in a day.
I'm gonna leave and guys gonna be like, oh my god, he can't code at all.
Of course, you had the added stress of knowing the world's gonna see you. Everybody will be out there going, "Oh, that idiot, he missed this
I know.
game."
So the world knows I did some things on purpose. So.